Welcome to the Chapter 7 lecture with more on links, layout, and mobile. In this chapter, you will learn how to code relative hyperlinks to web pages and folders within a website, configure a hyperlink to a named fragment internal to a web page, configure images with CSS sprites, configure a 3-column page layout using CSS, configure CSS for printing, describe mobile design best practices, configure web pages for mobile display using the viewport meta tag, and apply responsive web design techniques with CSS3 media queries and flexible images. The textbook also covers CSS Flexbox and CSS grid layout, but that is a little more advanced and will be taught in GIT414 if you choose to continue with your web learning. As discussed in Chapter 2, a relative link is used to link to web pages within your site. The way you code a link depends upon the folder structure where you have the files stored. The first example code is code that you might put on the home page, linking from the home page to the contact page. If you look in the folder structure on the right, you can see that the home page, also called index.html, is in the same folder as the contact page. Therefore, the href location is just contact.html. When you just have the file name as the href, the browser knows to look in the same folder for the contact page. The second example of code has the href location as rooms/canyon.html. This is indicating to the browser that the canyon.html file is not in the same folder as the index.html, but instead it needs to go down a level within the Casita folder and look in the rooms folder where it will find the canyon.html file. In the third code example, the link is from the Canyon page, linking to the index.html page. If you look at the folder structure, you will see that the Canyon page lives in the Rooms folder. To get to the index.html, which is in the Casita folder, the browser needs to look one folder up. This is represented by using .. and is used when linking to a file up one directory level from the current page. So from the canyon.html page, the link to the index.html page is .. index.html. When linking to a file that is in a folder on the same level as the current folder, the href value will use the .. notation to include moving up one level, then specify the desired folder. So in the fourth code example, the .. indicates to look outside of the current folder, in this case the Rooms folder, and then look to the Events folder to find the weekend.html file. Don't be too concerned if the .. notation is a little confusing. Most of this book is spent on absolute links to other websites or relative links to files within the same folder. Those who have been around computers a lot and understand folder structure will find this easier than those who are new to computers and folder structure. You can also link to a part of a web page. An example of this would be if you are coding a large glossary with many alphabetized items. You might have all the letters of the alphabet at the top of the page, and when the user clicks on the desired letter, such as the letter H, the page will jump down to where the words that start with the letter H are located. When creating a link such as this, you must add two things to your code. First, you need to identify where the user will end up when they click on the link. Or in other words, what fragment of the page will they land on, or in the glossary example, where the words that start with the letter H are located. This is accomplished by adding an ID right above the first word that starts with H. The code could be div ID equal H and then close a div. However, this does not have to be a div. It can be any tag with an ID on it. Next, you need to create the link that the user will click on that will take them to the page fragment. Or in the glossary example, you need to create a link on the letter H at the top of the page. This would be coded ahref equal #H, and then the letter H wrapped with the A tag. When the user clicks on this link, they will land wherever you have added the ID. Note, you need to use the hashtag in the anchor link. This is also the same if you are creating a back to top link. The words back to top are what the user clicks on, therefore it is in an A tag. When they click on it, they go to the ID with the hashtag top. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you click on a link, it opens in the same window, yet other times a completely new window is opened and the page loads in the new window? That is the result of how the developer coded the link. The target attribute is used to establish where the page will open up. If the target attribute is set to _blank, the site will open in a new blank window. If the target attribute is not used, the site will load in the current window. If the page opens in the same window, the user will need to click the back arrow to get back to your site. If the page opens up in a new window, the user just needs to click back on the tab where your site is located. Usability studies suggest that you should always open the web page in the current window, and if the user wants to open a new window, they can do that themselves by right-clicking on the link and selecting Open in New Window. I personally prefer to have sites open in a new window, but I need to remember that it is not about me, it is about the user that I am designing for. What is it that they prefer? You can create a link around a block level element such as this H1 tag and the P tag. The ultimate result is that the entire area is clickable instead of just the words you might have the link in. This is something you might want to do perhaps if your audience is older and might have difficult getting their mouse to land just on the words in order for them to click. You can also set a larger area to inline elements such as the A tag by displaying the element as a block level element and adding styles such as padding to enlarge the clickable area. In an earlier chapter, you learned how to make an email link that launched the user's mail service provider when the link was clicked on. You can also configure telephone numbers that will initiate a phone call or text message. However, unlike the email, which works on the computer, initiating phone calls and text messages only works on devices that can place phone calls, such as the cell phone. In the first example above, the letters tel and then a colon precede the phone number in the href. When the user clicks on the phone number between the A tags, a window will pop up on the user's phone asking if they want to make the call. In the second example, SMS colon is used, which will initiate a text message. A sprite is an image that contains multiple small graphics. In this example, you can see two lighthouses, one that is white and one that is gray. In the image on the right, you can see that the white graphic is used in the nav, but on hover, the darker graphic is used to have better contrast with the lighter hover background color. Since the two smaller images are contained in one image, the browser only has to download one image, which can reduce the size of the site and improve download times. The CSS sprite uses background-image, background-repeat, and background-position to manipulate the placement of the background image to display the desired image. The single graphics file saves download time because the browser only needs to make one HTTP request for the combined image instead of multiple requests for the individual smaller images. When browsers display web pages, they must make a separate HTTP request for every file used by the page, including CSS files and image files. Now we are going to discuss a little bit about page layout. Here is a common 3-column page layout that consists of a header across the top of the page with 3 columns below it, consisting of navigation, content, and a sidebar, with a footer at the bottom within the main. In this example, they have floated the left column to the left and gave it a width of 150 pixels, and they floated the aside to the right and gave it a width of 200 pixels, and then the center is taken up by the remaining room available on the screen. And then they cleared the float on the footer by using the clear property and setting the value to both. This is just one way to do a 3-column layout. The mobile web has many limitations, and it is important that you understand some of the mobile design best practices to deal with these limitations. You need to optimize the layout, navigation, graphics, and text for mobile use, all while using one HTML file, also referred to as one web. The HTML file for the desktop version will be the same for the tablet and the mobile, just styled differently for each viewport width. To optimize the layout for mobile use, you want single column design, limit scrolling in one direction, vertical, use heading elements, use lists, avoid using tables, provide labels for form controls, avoid using pixel units in style sheets, and avoid absolute positioning in style sheets. The book mentions hiding content that is not essential for the mobile use, but you should think about this carefully before you do it. Why is this content not essential for mobile use? Or you can think about it from another angle. If it's not essential content, why do you have it in the HTML at all? If it's not essential, do the users on desktop or tablet version need it? I would like to discourage you from hiding content, unless perhaps it is an image that is not needed to understand the content of the site. The W3C recommends the following for optimizing navigation on the mobile web. Provide minimal navigation near the top of the page. You need to provide consistent navigation from page to page. Avoid hyperlinks that open files in new windows or pop-ups, and try to balance the number of hyperlinks on the page and the number of levels needed to access information. The navigation needs to be simple and easy to understand. You should also optimize the graphics for mobile use. Avoid displaying images that are wider than the screen width, as this may result in a horizontal scroll bar. Configure alternate small optimized background images. Avoid using images that contain text. Avoid the use of large graphic images. Specify the size of the images, and provide alternate text for graphics and other non-text elements. You also want to be sure to provide good contrast between text and background colors. Use common font typefaces, configure font size with M units or percentages, and use a short descriptive page title. I want to take a minute to show you this MediaQuery.es website. It shows some examples of some websites at different viewport widths. So you can see here the Yale site. Here's the desktop version. This looks like it's the tablet version. This is maybe a smaller tablet or a larger phone version, and this is a smaller phone version. So you can see at the desktop they have all the content laid out. At the tablet, they haven't done a lot to change it at this point, but you can tell that the picture is a little bit smaller. There's less space up here when compared to the space on the desktop. You can see in this size that they have this box covering up more of the picture, and then down in the phone version or the smallest version, you can see how everything has shrunk a little bit, but all the information is still there. It just changes its appearance through the use of media queries for the different viewport sizes. So now that you have seen how the content can shift depending upon the screen size, I want to take a few minutes to discuss what is required to make this happen. The default action for most mobile devices is to zoom out and scale the web page. As you can see in the top image on the right of the screen, the entire website is displayed in the small viewport, but it is so small it is impossible to read and impossible to accurately click on the navigation. The viewport meta tag configures the width and initial scale of the browser viewport. The code for the meta tag is shown on the slide, and since it is a meta tag, it belongs in the head of the HTML document. I'm going to advise you not to copy and paste this information from a PDF or from a Word document. There are a lot of quotation marks in this code, and there is a high probability it won't work if you just cut and paste it. If you do cut and paste it, be sure to go back and delete all the quotation marks and replace them. I have had students say they struggled for hours and their code didn't work, and it was all about the quotation marks in the viewport meta tag. In addition to the viewport meta tag in the HTML document, you also need to add the actual media query itself. There are two examples on this screen of how to apply media queries. The first one is an example of using a link element in the HTML, and the second example is applying it just in the CSS, which is what you will do in this course. Here's a sample CSS style sheet that I want to show you so you can get a better understanding of the syntax that's involved and exactly how these media queries work. So in this CSS style sheet, you don't need to pay attention to what's actually on it until I tell you. So you can see it starts on line 1, and they have styles for the header, the body, the wrapper, and then we're going to go down here to about line 118, and we have our first media query, at media only screen and max width of 1024 pixels. So the styles above this media query, all these styles up here are essentially the desktop styles. And then when you get here, 1024, that might be a laptop width. You're saying now for anything smaller than 1024 pixels, I want to change some of the styles that I designed for the desktop. For example, for the body, I want to change the margin, the padding, the background color, the background image. They changed it to none, where before there was a background image in the body. They changed some things on the wrapper. So it's not really important that you understand exactly what they changed, but more the syntax for the media query. And then you can see here on line 171, we have this closing curly bracket. This closing curly bracket is closing the media query. This closing curly bracket on line 170 is closing the styles for the main element that started here on line 165. And the second closing bracket is actually closing the media query. So now on line 173, the developer has said, hey, at media only screen and max width of 768 pixels. So this is saying for everything from size 0 to 768, make these changes to the CSS. So overwrite what's above and change the H1 styles, the nav A. They made a few more styles. And then at the very end, you'll see the second closing curly bracket, which is closing that second media query. Actually, I want to scroll up a little bit just so you can make sure that you saw the correct syntax. Here is the opening curly bracket for this media query, at media only screen, and then max width. And note that that's in parentheses, not curly brackets, space, opening curly bracket. And then you have all your styles. And down here is the closing curly bracket, which is actually closing that media query. So now that you have a little bit better understanding of media queries, I want to elaborate on an earlier slide in this lesson where you learned about adding a telephone number to a site. With the use of media queries, you can add the number to your site as both a clickable link and as text with the paragraph tag, and then hide the number that you don't want to display at a given viewport width. You will want to assign an ID to each item so you can target it in your CSS. For example, you could assign an ID of mobile to the code that contains the clickable link and an ID of desktop to the code that contains the non-clickable text. Then, in your media queries, you add styles such as display none to the number coded as a clickable link in the desktop, and only the number in the paragraph element will display. Then in the mobile viewport media query, you could hide the number that is coded as text in the paragraph element, and only the ID mobile will display. I realize this can be a little complicated to understand, so you might need to spend a few minutes studying the code shown on this slide. And that wraps up the Chapter 7 lecture.